Welcome to Conversations. It was January 10th, 1966, when one of Mississippi's most horrific civil rights era murders occurred near Hattiesburg. The home and business of Vernon Dahmer Sr. were torched by members of the Ku Klux Klan. Vernon Dahmer, who had been an outspoken and staunch supporter of voting rights, died from his injuries, but not before he was able to rescue his family from the blaze. 50 years later, almost to the day, Vernon Dahmer was recognized for his contributions and sacrifices to the civil rights movement during a ceremony honoring him and his family at the state capitol in Jackson. It is our privilege to welcome two members of the Dahmer family to our studios, oldest son Vernon Dahmer Jr. and youngest son Dennis Dahmer. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. It's good to see you. Good to see you. We've been having a great conversation off the air, and we were joking last night. You and I exchanged a couple emails, and you sent me some information about the history of the family and how it got to that part of Forest County. And I figured by the end of our conversation that we were going to end up being related. It's just amazing sometimes how Mississippi has 2 degrees of separation. But I think the thing I got from it was that not only was your dad a pillar in the community, your roots ran incredibly deep.
We go back to the 1800s.
Wow.
Back around 1820, John Kelly, with his wife, 3 sons, and one of the sons was married, and 9 slaves. And then with those 9 slaves, there was a slave family that had a daughter named Sarah. And they settled here it was Perry County at that time. And later on, it became Forest County, where we live now. They settled in, and John Kelly homesteaded hundreds of acres of land because he was one of the first settlers that coming to the area at that time. And he settled down there with the family, and they started clearing the land because there were plenty virgin pine timber and converting grown over land into farmland, and he had plenty help. Right. The 9 slaves, and there are probably others in the area too. And that's where the community really began. And after he was here about 5 years, he passed away in around 1825, according to the record. And when he did, that left those 3 sons primarily in charge of everything that he had acquired. And they had one son named Green Kelly, who was single, and they had a son that was married. And Green became involved with Sarah, the slave family's daughter, when she grew up. And as a result of that relationship came what? My family.
Exactly.
Yeah, out of this mixed-race environment, even way back then, okay?
Right.
And our great-grandfather, Warren Kelly, our grandmother, Ellen Kelly Dahmer, was one of the children who came out of that relationship. And it was pretty obvious, based on what we heard from previous members of our family, old ones who passed on, that what you call slaves were not really slaves with John. They call them hands. And I guess you might say it was a part of the family. Yeah, you're a slave, but we don't put you in the category of being totally subservient to us.
Right.
As Green and Sarah started to have their children, Sarah also had a boyfriend somewhere along the way who was a slave, okay? So she had 2 sets of children. One by her African significant other, okay, and by Green. Now, Green and Sarah naturally were not married, and according to the census that has been dug up here in recent years by one of our neighbors and distant cousins, when they did the census, by the way, Sarah was always a part of the household, but not as a wife, and he never had a wife. But as time went on, and the Civil War, came into being, and then land started to be parceled up, between the ex-slaves and all, John Kelly, as kids there, began to pass some of the land, and particularly Green in our case, down to his children that he had by Sarah. But in the meantime, they also passed land down to her kids that she had by the
Other
Africans,
slave men.
Yeah.
other slave men. Okay,
Yeah.
So it was a pretty diverse community.
pretty diverse community,
Yeah.
right?
So by the time your dad was born, he only got a 10th grade education, but he was a very solid businessman. He was very, it was like one of those things that he was ready to go ahead and get the store started, the sawmill started. I talk about being a pillar in the community. He ended up providing jobs for white and blacks as well. And, he opened up his store to allow people, because at the time, the poll taxes is $2 you had to
Right.
pay. The Voting Rights Act had passed, but there was still considerable resistance here in Mississippi
Absolutely.
but he said, you know what, I'm going to open that up because he truly believed in voting. And that ad, I talked about the ad on the radio, that set the Ku Klux Klan off. And that's,
Yeah. He hadn't been involved in the civil rights thing all my life. And, during my older brother's life, he's from a community of activists.
Right.
He wasn't the only one out there. There was a lot of them out there that felt like this because they all had this similar lineage coming up, where, hey, if you work hard, you ought to be treated fairly.
Right.
And for somebody who want to restrict you strictly based upon your skin color, it just didn't set well with them. And so they resisted that type thing, and they fought against that type thing. But back to my dad with the store, from what I was told, the register of voters at that time and my dad both agreed that it would be a good idea to have this poll tax book at his store at some location other than downtown.
Right.
Because if you went downtown as a person of color and you went in the voter register's office to pay your poll tax or whatever, but then you became targeted as an individual
The
who's
intimidation.
Intimidation,
Exactly.
you can get ready for all of that. So to get away from the intimidation and to make it easier, they could come to the store and pay I think it was a $2 fee for poll tax. And he made it known that, hey, if you don't have the $2, but you are willing to go downtown and try and register and vote, I will pay the poll taxes for you. So that was one of the things, but that was one of many things that he had done.
Yeah.
We had the first two SNCC workers that came to Forest County, Hollis Watkins and Curtis Hayes. They came and they lived with us in the house. Most people were scared to have them in the house, and rightly so, because you got these individuals running around out here doing some really bad things.
Right.
But
your mom and dad, they slept in shifts, so they knew the threat. You'd gotten the phone calls, and
right.
that night, Sam Bowers made the call, and they there was 8 that showed up, and
more. It was two carloads.
Yeah,
who
2
knows?
carloads, and they had for some reason not done shifts that night, and
from what I was told is that, well, by the time that attack had happened in '66, we were no longer getting the threatening phone calls. They were no longer driving by, shooting out the windows in the store, shooting the mailbox off, the post or whatever. And President Johnson had signed the voting rights bill.
Right.
So they really thought
the storm had passed.
Right,
was
the
passing.
storm had passed, so they started to relax.
Yeah.
But during the time when things were really bad, they were sleeping in shifts, and we were heavily armed as a family.
Yeah.
We were outdoorsmen, spent a lot of times hunting and stuff, so we had a lot of guns.
Yeah.
My dad, sitting next to his bed, probably had at least 2 or 3 shotguns loaded with buckshots, a couple of rifles, pistols. The bedroom that my older brother and I slept in, that was 3 or 4 shotguns on the wall in the rack, all loaded. Okay, we didn't have a gun that wasn't loaded.
Sure.
So they knew what could happen to them, but when it did happen, it was once they had let their guard down.
Yeah.
I think something of interest here during the time that Mom and Dad were sleeping in shifts. My dad is the father of 8 kids. 7 boys and 1 girl. 6 of his sons, including myself, served a total of 7, 8 years in the military in defense of this country. And at the time that my mom, we're Korean and Vietnam era veterans,
Yeah.
active duty. You know, we all pulled active duty time. 3 of us went on to become career servicemen, including myself. But during the time that Mom and Dad were sleeping in shifts, they had 5 sons serving on active
Right.
duty. So we were in the Korean and Vietnam era, okay? And we were out there protecting the security of our country, okay?
And your dad was fighting for one of the rights.
And my dad was back here, and he and my mom had to sleep in shifts to try to keep from the family being annihilated
Right.
by the very people that we are protecting in uniform.
I think a lot of people, when they you know, and I remember reading about what happened to you in history books, and it was like a paragraph. And I think what a lot of people miss was the incredible bravery of that evening and if anybody's ever been burned, they know how incredibly painful that is. And of course, your sister Betty got burned on her arms pretty severely.
Right.
But your dad stood there and held off 2 carloads of people shooting and throwing gasoline bombs in there while you could get out.
Yes, he did. You know, he didn't have a choice. You know, he did what any man would do.
Would protect his family.
Yeah, protect your home and your family. You know, these individuals didn't call him up and say, "Hey, we're coming down there to burn you out."
Right.
You know,
No, they show up.
They show up and they get out the car shooting.
Right.
Okay, as my older brother has said on more than one occasion, you know, Vernon Dahmer was enough of a man. If they'd have went there and knocked on his door and told him, say, "Hey, we come for you," and not your family, I'm sure he'd have went out that door.
Right.
He wouldn't have went out that door empty-handed.
Exactly.
But he'd have went out that door.
Yeah.
Okay, to protect his family. So he did what he had to do.
Right.
And when that happened, that night I was there. I slept through it. Didn't hear a gunshot being fired at all, with all that gunshot going on around there. I'm sleeping in the back bedroom in the house with my older brother Harold. And neither one of us never heard a shot fired.
Really?
Had a solid wood house. It was well built.
Yeah.
And so the only reason I figured we didn't hear that is by the grace of God. Because if we had, you know, we'd have gotten up, we'd have come out that window, the Klansmen had that house surrounded.
Yeah.
Probably would have killed both of us right there coming out the window.
Yeah.
Okay? But he was able to hold them off as they attacked the house and the store.
Right.
They burnt the house and the store.
Right.
With my 80-some-year-old aunt living in an apartment behind the store attached to it.
And she escaped too.
She escaped. She walked out past them while they were burning the place and shooting at my dad. They didn't see her. I don't think if they did, they probably would have shot her.
Right.
But I think by him moving the way that my mama describes it through that house, from window to window, from door to window, constantly shooting at these individuals, they actually thought it was more than one individual shooting back at them, is what I've read in some of their statements that they've given to the FBI and other authorities.
So the feds came in and kind of briefly talk about the aftermath on that, because the people involved, I mean, this was 1960s Mississippi justice.
Right. They had a field office in Jackson. They had put an office into Jackson because of all of these type civil rights crimes, atrocities taking place. They came in, established that office, I believe, during the time of the Philadelphia killings. Okay.
And I know Jim Ingram was one of the agents that came down. I remember meeting him many years ago.
Ingram, a guy named Roy K. Moore, who was the head of that office. So once that attack had transpired, they immediately gotten involved in it. You know, the FBI and took the lead position in investigating, and of course they were assisted by State Highway Patrol and some of the local investigators there. But the FBI had a pretty good network of agents spread out across the state of Mississippi, living in these different communities, including Laurel, Mississippi. They had informants in these different Klan groups.
Because the people attacked your house weren't from your community.
No,
they were from
not.
over from Jones County.
They were from Jones County. You know, I have read and been told that the local Klansmen would not attack my dad because he was too well respected by the business community.
Yeah, and you saw that because afterwards the community stepped up and helped you rebuild. They helped.
did.
They helped with education. I mean, it was.
They did. They
Yeah.
did. They came forward. The black and the white community, primarily under the direction of Dr. Nooncaster,
Yeah.
who was president of William Carey College at that time, and also, I believe, chairman of the local Chamber of Commerce,
Right.
who spearheaded this thing. So you had some individuals who came forward, not everybody, but enough did,
Yeah.
to make it possible to at least for us to get a home back.
Right.
And we appreciate what they did. We really do.
Iconic photo of 4 of the brothers
Yes.
in uniform standing over the wreckage of the house.
Yes, I'm one of the 4.
And you were one of the 4. I thought I recognized you in that
Yeah.
picture. So, but that was just so powerful because, like I said, you were in uniform representing the rights of our country, and yet this had happened. You grew up, you sat there and watched the trials go on,
Oh,
you
yeah.
watched the justice, and that's tough on the family too, because you're not feeling like you're getting the kind of justice or closure. But suddenly, tide started turning. Byron de Lebec was
Right.
brought back up, and it
Right.
kind of opened up the door again to retry and to.
It
so,
did.
So Sam Bowers had been tried 4 times.
Yeah,
at this
you had.
point.
There'd been some mistrials.
Yeah.
11-1 verdicts, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
10-2 verdicts.
10-2.
Oh, wow.
Verdicts like that.
Yeah.
But backing up just a little bit
Sure.
about the first set of trials.
Yeah.
We appreciate what Attorney James Finch, who was the district attorney, and county prosecutor was a guy named Jim Dukes. We appreciate what they did
Right.
during that time, because it was, we knew that it was going to be an uphill battle.
Right.
There was something like 18 individuals that was indicted
Wow.
on
Yeah.
state charges as well as federal charges. 18 individuals. Okay, out of that 18, about 9 of them went to trial. About 5 of them ended in a hung jury mistrial, and about 4 of them were convicted.
Yeah.
But over half of them never saw the inside of a courtroom of justice other than the day that they were indicted. So there were a lot of people that were involved in this. This wasn't no spur of the moment type thing, based
Yeah.
upon what I've read
Right.
about these Klansmen. They
Right.
had this system.
Yeah, 1 through 4 scale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Where, where they would target you, and he was scheduled for a 4, which
was
the
death.
Death,
Yeah.
and burn him out.
Yeah.
Okay, and I've read books about some of the things that they've done. Now, they were caught and indicted, and some of them prosecuted in my father's case.
Right.
But this is not the only thing that these individuals had done.
Yeah.
From that area. They had done all sorts of other things that they have never been held accountable for.
Yes,
Okay.
if I may add to that, one of the former Klansmen told me that the FBI, during their investigation, had on record that their element of the Klan had killed at least 10 people.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That's in the record.
Yeah.
But you know what he told me? There's more than that.
Yeah.
Some of them we threw in the river, they never found them.
Oh.
The families felt maybe they had gone on north or wherever.
Just disappeared.
Just
Yeah.
disappeared. He said it was a lot more than that.
One of my coworkers.
And,
oh, I'm sorry. Go
That's
ahead.
okay.
No.
When we go back to Mr. Finch and Mr. Dukes, when you think about the time that they volunteered as local Mississippians
Yeah.
in Forest County to prosecute the Klan when everybody, including whites, were afraid of that element,
Yeah.
it took a lot of nerve for them to step out and do this. And I think this speaks well of those 2 gentlemen because their families too, became at risk.
Right.
Because all of a sudden you had moved over there and you're protecting now. You're trying to convict us for what? Getting the people that we hate. Yeah. What side are you on?
Right.
And they stepped over that line to do that. And this, I will always appreciate from them. They stepped up.
Billy Roy Pitts.
Billy Roy Pitts.
Billy Roy Pitts, one of the shooters. Jerry Mitchell was on my radio show talking about how one day he got the phone call and said, "Would you meet me in the hotel room?" And kind of helped Jerry do some of the investigative work that helped bring Sam Bowers back to trial on that. But y'all had a very personal encounter with him too. He actually asked y'all for forgiveness. That had to be an incredibly powerful moment.
Yes. During the last trials, which took place in 1998, the one that we're talking about now.
Right.
Once Jerry found Billy Roy in Louisiana, he told him about what had happened, that we were getting ready, you know, to come back to trial again, and asked him if would he come and testify. And he said, certainly. And he volunteered to come back to Mississippi. So he was put in protective custody at the local county jail, waiting for the trials to start. And during that period, he asked one of the deputies if he could contact me or want somebody in the family, well, me in particular.
Yeah.
He wanted to talk with me. And I said, oh yeah, certainly. So the deputy sheriff carried me to the local jail, opened the door. It's the first time I'd been in jail, by the way. And I went in, and when I walked in, he stood up and he just started right off to talking immediately.
Wow.
Yeah, he says, you know, first of all, I thanked him for coming back.
Yeah.
Because he volunteered, and Jerry told me that. I said, I appreciate coming back to help us. He says, I've been wanting to talk to you for years. He says, every January, he said, I wanted to call you, but I didn't know what the response would be. He said, but I want to let you know that I'm sorry they ever got involved in this. And he started to explain to me how he got involved as a young man. And it was fun, you know, burning crosses, you know, and beating up people going on. And he says, then once they started doing things and started killing people, then he wanted out. He said, but I knew too much, and I was hooked. And then if I had left, they'd kill me. And he stayed there. And after a brief conversation, well, it lasted a pretty good while, by the way, he says, I just hope one day, you know, that you can understand I really regret this.
Wow.
And so, and he says, and if you can forgive me for this, no, he didn't say it that way. You could tell he was asking for forgiveness.
Right.
Okay, and that came up. And I looked at him, then I thought about my past and how I was raised in the church. And hey, if your enemy comes and say he's sorry, and you really see it, and he explains to you why he's sorry, and you said, oh man, I got to think about this, because if he hadn't come forward in the first trials, we wouldn't have got not one conviction.
Right.
As you well know.
Yeah.
And now he's coming back to help us a second time. That tells me enough that you're sorry.
Right.
And when he did, I told him, I says, you know what, I can do that. And then he grabbed me and he started to cry. And tears running down his cheek. Then I started to cry. And we embraced one another, and he says, I feel good. Well, you know what, that was a relief for me.
Yeah.
Because what you were involved, but I felt, now look, you really regretted it.
Yeah.
And we can move on from
And to
this
hold
one.
that kind of anger in your heart for so long.
Right.
Yeah. You know, I think about your dad's absolute dedication for voting rights, and to think that your mom was elected a county supervisor.
Yeah.
That
Commission,
to me,
the voting commission.
Yeah, that was an incredible. I just thought that was kind of a nice exclamation point on the end of the sentence.
Well, that was several years after it happened.
Yeah.
Probably at least 20 years, 25 or 30 years
Right.
before she was elected.
Yeah.
You know.
But it
And,
just shows signs of progress.
it shows signs of progress. You know, as I said earlier, we're living in a different Mississippi today
Yeah.
than the Mississippi of January 1966.
Right.
Now, it's not on all a rosy picture.
Right.
You know, there are a lot of things that are still very wrong,
Yeah.
not only in Mississippi, but in America.
Right.
All you got to do is turn on the TV, you see it.
Yeah.
You see it with the current issues out there now that the young people are involved in protesting about. But one good thing about America, and one of the reasons why America has been able to survive, is because America will change.
Yeah.
And it will change for the better. Now, it may not change as fast as we want it to change, but if you keep bringing these issues up, America will change. And that's why we were able to have a 50-year commemoration by the state legislature, because America, Mississippi, has moved far enough to allow that to happen.
You never would have dreamed when you were standing there looking at the burned out rubble that one day the state of Mississippi would have that moment for you, your family in the Capitol.
Never.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
I saw it as being a continuation of what I was raised in.
Yeah.
You know, that bad things were done to us for no reason, and we could do nothing about it.
Right.
And that's a helpless feeling, very helpless. And I was totally just devastated, because I knew how well my family had been respected, in particular my dad and the rest of them. And to have that to happen in my community, him, I really, really had to get a grip.
But 50 years later, your family is very respected.
Yes.
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 And it's,
Oh, yeah.
you talk about, you know, in the long term, with the change and with what went on at the Capitol, it was it had to be a very sweet moment for
Oh,
y'all.
yes, definitely.
Gentlemen, thank you for coming in today and visiting with us, and thank you for your leadership, and of course, you know, best wishes for your family as well.
Thank you. We
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
inviting us.
And thank you for watching. I'm Marshall Ramsey, and I'll see you next time on Conversations.